Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar on mental health through theatre on this World Mental Health Day 2020. It's great to have you with us and hope you can join us and interact with us on how we promote mental health and well-being through theatre. Our first program is actually on exploring mental health through theatre, and we have a great panelist, which I'll come to in a minute. Let me just introduce how we are going with a project in Kerala on mental health literacy in urban and rural communities in Kerala using applied theatre, which is called MeHeLP. MeHeLP is actually funded from the UK Research Council, and we are working with communities in 4 districts in Kerala, in Malappuram, Kozhikode, Palakkad, and Ernakulam. And we have interviewed a lot of people in relation to their understanding, their perspectives on mental health, mental illness, and we produced a piece of theatre that we have used to interact with communities in all these 4 districts in February. We are using theatre all the way through in order to engage with the communities, but because of the pandemic, we are slightly slowed down, but we are using other modes in terms of films and other things to engage with the communities. We hope to come back to the theatre, hopefully in next year when there is lower incidence of corona infections in Kerala and throughout the world. This is a 3 to 4 year project. We started this project in September 2018, and we will go on till the 31st of October 2021. And the whole idea is to create mental health literacy and trying to engage with people in bringing the importance and also to try and promote how people, government agencies and NGOs can come together to develop mental health literacy in Kerala. We, in this program, the structure of the program is that we would have a short video about one of our theatre performances in Palakkad, and then I'll come back and introduce the panel, and then Mr. Chandradasan would actually take on and lead the discussion for the rest of the webinar. So can we have the theatre piece? Thank you, Parvati. Now, in this first webinar on mental health through theatre, we have an international panel of theatre makers and film artists. where we hope to actually discuss how theater can play a major role in promoting mental health and well-being. So this is under the banner of Creative Arts for Mental Health. We are organizing a series of webinars and other programs from today to the 31st of October with a main focus on the Kerala audience. So I have great pleasure to actually introduce our international panel. First of all, let me introduce Gautami Nair. Gautami is a Malayalam film actor, and she started her career in Malayalam films, which was in 2012, which was actually a box office success. After many noted works, she has made a debut as a director for a commercial movie called Rhythm in 2019. She completed her graduation and post-graduation in psychology, and she's currently working as a junior researcher at the Sri Chitra Tirunal Medical Sciences and Technology in Trivandrum. So welcome, Gautami, to this session. Somebody who lives close to me, Mr. Andy Barrett, who's a theatre maker and a partner in all our projects in India. Andy is a co-founder and artistic director of Excavate Theatre Company, Nottingham, in the UK. He has written all of the company's shows and co-directed a majority of them. And Andy has been a partner in a project in Kerala, on MeHeLP, and also on our project in Pune, which completed on mental health and resilience last year. I have also great pleasure to welcome Mr. Ratnagaran from Kozhikode. Mr. Ratnagaran is a theatre director, actor, and playwright who has contributed immensely to the Malayalam amateur theatre movement. He began his journey from the direction of small productions by the Deshapushni Public Library. He became well known in amateur and professional dramas by developing his own style and mode. He has bagged many awards and directed over 300 plays. So welcome, Mr. Ratnagaran, to this webinar.
Thank you, thank you.
I have great pleasure to introduce my friend and research partner, Professor Michael Wilson from Loughborough University. Mike is a professor of drama at Loughborough University, and Mike is also a member of the program advisory boards for the Research Council's UK program on digital economy and the Arts and Humanities Research Council UK programs on digital transformations and connected communities. He is also a member of the Arts and Humanities Research Council Strategic Reviews Group and a chair of British Council's Arts and Humanities panel for the Researcher Links and Institutional Links program. Mike is also a partner in our Kerala project. So welcome, Mike, to the webinar. And finally, and most importantly, we have our theatre partner, Mr. Chandradasan from Logadharmi, who works with us on the MeHeLP project. Chandra is the founder director of Logadharmi Theatre Group and Maravillu, a children's theatre group, both based at Kochi. He is the director, board member of the RRC Bangalore of NSD. He has directed over 30 plays in Malayalam, English, Sanskrit, Kannada, Lithuanian, Finnish, and Tamil. Chandradasan won the National Award for the Best Play at Mahindra Theatre Festival for his play in Karnataka in New Delhi in 2008. So I have great pleasure to welcome you, Chandra, to the webinar and hand over to you as chair for this discussion.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you all people, at least in this format. We should have been meeting directly and doing theater 2-3 months before to wind up this program. But the pandemic gives us this situation. So according to the plan, we have to finish this session by 5:45, something like that, so that each person can speak for 4 to 5 minutes very briefly. So instead of making a speech, we can just say this point by point. These are the things which can be discussed or which are relevant. So I'll keep myself off to the last, so that you people will get more time to talk. And since there is no order is given to me who speaks first and who speaks last, I'll go by the alphabetic order. Uh, so at the first outset, I'll ask Anti Barrett to speak and share his experience, views, and approaches which he can do. I don't know whether this is to be translated into Malayalam. Somebody has to tell me whether it's fine to go it in English or needed to be spoken in Malayalam also. So, and he was part of the project, and he was doing the workshop with us in Lautharmi, and also when we are rehearsing the project, he was partly scripting and directing and all those things of the programs which are produced, which has been shown in 8 different locations in 4 districts. So, over to Auntie.
Okay, hello everyone. I will just briefly explain how we made the play and the purpose of the play, if that's all right. If at any point you need to stop me to translate, please tell me. Basically, we had a collection of narratives of interviews that we received from people that have been using various clinic settings, their families, their carers, the professionals. And we interrogated those to uncover a series of key themes that we wanted to explore and to share with a range of different communities across Kerala. And this meant us doing 2 things. It meant us looking for commonalities for those things that were shared amongst the narratives. But also as theatre makers, we were looking for those things that were very specific, for really interesting images and for metaphors, because we wanted to create a piece of art, a piece of theatre as well. And our purpose was to be able to present to an audience something, and the audience was for clinics, something that they recognized as truthful, something in which they could see aspects of their experience that they recognized from a range of different perspectives. And the aim was, in doing that, to encourage them to share their knowledge and their experience. So at the end of the film, we just saw, when it said a happy ending, I think it was slightly different. I think it was an ending in which we were saying to people, how can you help us? We are in this situation where we are facing challenges, and we have shared them with you, and we would now like you to help us overcome those challenges. So it was very much about encouraging a dialogue between the actors and the audience, and in doing that, to develop a debate around aspects of mental health that may otherwise perhaps not be spoken about in a public arena. So that's what I'd like to say at this point, really, Chandra.
Thank you, Auntie. Very briefly, given what was the process which we adopted. Hearing this, I'll ask Gautami to speak now.
Good afternoon, everybody. So unfortunately, I do not have much of an experience with theater, but I think when you think of films or basically any art form, I feel that it's a very art is a very easy way to make people connect with. It's a very easy way to communicate things that you want to say. So I think with regard to like theater or films or any such medium, it's I think it's much more easier and a quicker and an effective way to make people understand what you're trying to say. So if I actually have to talk about a movie, there are like a lot of films in Malayalam that have actually come out where they've taken mental health, specific illness, as the background for the entire story. So we have Manichitra Tare that, that dealt with personality disorder. We have Innale that dealt with dissociative fugue. And then you had, like, very recently, Kumulangi Nights actually was a very popular movie in the recent time, where one of the characters, they spoke about how he was going through depression. And at least I personally feel that, films are something that, or theaters or plays, all of these are things that people actually would want to watch, because there's a source of entertainment as well, and they're getting a lot of relevant information at the same time. So I feel that, if we're able to delicately put across a lot of information, it'll really help to increase a lot of awareness that, on the basis of mental health, because I still believe that there's a lot of taboo behind mental health and, having such illness. And, even now, people do not want to openly talk about the fact that they're actually going, getting help for their mental health, or they're having such a problem, or they have had such an issue in the past. So I feel that, through such narratives, it will be very easy for just local communities, urban or rural settings, to have a much more wider awareness about such things, and make them understand that mental health is not something that you need to be ashamed about, but it's just as simple as having a common cold or a flu or even the coronavirus right now. So I think that's what I would like to contribute. Sir, your mic is on mute. We can't hear you.
കേൾക്കുന്നുണ്ട്.
Okay. Mike. And the next speaker will be Mike Wilson. He is part of the project. He has been with us in a lot of discussions, and the first workshop also he was there. But when the play making process happened, he was not here, unluckily. But he know what exactly we are doing and what are our intentions, our methodology, and what is the result. So over to Mike to add to the points which Andy and Gautami has already put across.
Thank you very much, Chandra. I'll have to do the same thing that Andy did, and please interrupt me if you want me to stop, if there's any translation needed. I was just picking up, I suppose, a little bit on what Andy and Gautami were saying there. My interest and my background is also as a theatre maker before I became an academic, and I have a very large interest in ideas around story and storytelling, and theatre, of course, is just one of those ways in which we tell stories. And as Gautami said, there are other ways as well. We can look around us, and as artists, we tell stories in any number of ways, through film, through song, through dance, through writing. I mean, and the list is endless, because, of course, our need as human beings to tell each other stories and to listen to stories is fundamental to not only to our mental health, but to our social health as well. One of the things that I always believe is that one of the things we have to look after as a society is our story health. We have to maintain our health in telling stories and listening to stories. And I think theatre does two things simultaneously, or in fact, all art in a way does two things simultaneously. First of all, Andy said something very important, and that was around audiences looking to recognize themselves within the play that was put together, and that inevitably, I hope, happens because that play was based upon the testimonies and ideas that were gathered through the initial research process, when our researchers were talking to members of the communities around mental health experiences. So we hope what the play captured was a degree of authenticity, so that when people see that play, as Andy quite rightly said, what you do is say, yes, that's right. That's my story too. That's me. That happened to me, or that's somebody who I know. Now, that's not quite the same as reality, because we know that theatre isn't real. It's a performance. We can see the masks and so forth. It is something that is constructed and it is played back to us. And one of my favorite thinkers around storytelling was an American psychologist called Jerome Bruner, who died about 3 years ago now at the grand old age of 100. And he talked about storytelling being the conversion of private trouble into public plight. And what he meant is that something happens in the telling of a story or the performance of a piece of theatre where something that is deeply personal and that we thought, yes, this is my story, this is unique to me, suddenly becomes something that is collective, suddenly becomes something, oh yeah, that's right, I'm not alone in this anymore. My story may be unique, but it's not a unique story. It is something that belongs to all of us. So at the same time, what we're doing is becoming so critically involved within that story and recognizing that story as part of us. At the same time, theatre does something else, and it allows us, and now I'm going to draw on something that Gautami was saying about the ability to deal with difficult or taboo subjects. What theatre allows us to do is to step back from ourselves and from reality, because we are seeing something that is clearly created, that is something that is clearly on one level an artifice. It enables us to step back and to look on what is happening and look on our own story from a critical distance and say, I think actually, yes, I didn't realize that was the case, but now I do, because I can now observe what is going on from outside rather than inside. So what theatre, in other words, allows us to do is to be simultaneously inside the action whilst also being outside the action. So it gives us that duality to be able to understand our story and the stories of our friends, our families and our communities in new and different ways, as well as feeling that great sense of solidarity that theatre, and particularly live theatre, can give us. So it was that duality I just wanted to bring to the table this afternoon. There we go.
So Ratnakaran is an important theatre maker in Kerala. He has a lot of experience in doing theatre, and to the panelists, I would like to share that he also has done some work in similar projects, addressing the same issues of mentally affected people or such situations. So he has seen the production, one of the performances in Calicut. So it will be very interesting. All others are insiders, so it will be interesting to see to hear from him how he saw it and what he thinks about it. So over to Ratnakaran.
പറയാം. നല്ലൊരു പ്രവർത്തനമാണ് ഇതിന് ശരിക്കും വന്നിട്ടുള്ളത്. തിയേറ്ററിൽ എനിക്ക് ഒരു 10 വർഷമായിട്ട് ഈ മാനസികാരോഗ്യ രംഗത്ത് ഞാൻ പ്ലേകൾ ചെയ്യുന്നു. പ്ലേ മാത്രമല്ല, സംഗീത ശില്പങ്ങളും അതുപോലെ തന്നെ തെരുവ് നാടകങ്ങളാണ് എനിക്ക് കുറച്ചുകൂടി വളരെ എഫക്റ്റീവായിട്ട് തോന്നിയത്. അപ്പം കഴിഞ്ഞ ഒരു 4-5 വർഷം മുമ്പ് കേരളത്തിൽ കർഷകർ ആത്മഹത്യ ചെയ്തിരുന്നു. വയനാട്ടിലായിരുന്നു ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ഞാനൊരു എക്സ്പീരിയൻസ് പറയാം. വയനാട്ടിൽ അന്ന് നാടകം നടത്തുന്നു. IMAയുടെ നേതൃത്വത്തിൽ ഒരു സംഘം ഇവിടുന്ന് ഞങ്ങൾ നാടക പ്രവർത്തനമായിട്ട് വയനാട്ടിലേക്ക് പോയി. ആ വയനാട്ടിൽ അന്ന് ശരിക്കും മരണം മണക്കുന്ന ഒരു സമയമാണ്. മാനസികമായിട്ട് ജനങ്ങൾ ഭയങ്കര പ്രശ്നത്തിലാണ് നിൽക്കുന്നത്. അവിടെ ഇവരുടെ പ്രോബ്ലം ഉപയോഗപ്പെടുത്തി, ഇവരുടെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ നിജപ്പെടുത്തിക്കൊണ്ട് തെരുവിൽ ചെറിയ പ്ലേകൾ, ചെറിയ നാടകങ്ങൾ അവതരിപ്പിക്കപ്പെട്ടാണ്. അത് 3 ദിവസം നീണ്ടു നിൽക്കുന്ന പ്രവർത്തനമായിരുന്നു. പല സ്ഥലങ്ങളിലും, മലബാർ, വയനാടിന്റെ പല സ്ഥലങ്ങളിലും അത്തരം സംഭവങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടായി. അത്തരം നാടകങ്ങൾ അത് കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ മാത്രമല്ല, അതിൽ നിന്നുണ്ടാവുന്ന അനുഭവങ്ങൾ വളരെ വളരെ വ്യത്യസ്തമായിരുന്നു. ഓരോരുത്തരും വന്ന് ഞങ്ങളോട് ഒരുപാട് അഭിപ്രായങ്ങൾ പറയുന്നു, അനുഭവങ്ങൾ പറയുന്നു. ഇത് നാടകത്തിന്റെ വലിയൊരു പ്രധാന വിജയ ഘടകമാണ്. അത് കഴിഞ്ഞ വർഷം IMAക്ക് ഇവിടെ മാനസികാരോഗ്യ ദിനത്തോടനുബന്ധിച്ചിട്ട് ഒരു നാടകം നടത്തുകയുണ്ടായി. ആ നാടകം കഴിഞ്ഞ ഉടനെ തന്നെ അതിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കുന്ന കേൾക്കാനും കാണാനും വന്നിരുന്ന പലരും ഇന്ററാക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നു. മാത്രമല്ല അവര് ഇവിടെ ഒരു തണൽ എന്ന സംഘമുണ്ട്, മാനസികാരോഗ്യ കേന്ദ്രവുമായിട്ട് ബന്ധപ്പെടുന്ന ഒരു തണൽ. അവര് സ്വാഭാവികമായിട്ടും ഇത്തരം പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്യുന്നതാണ്. അവരെ ബന്ധപ്പെടാനും അങ്ങനെ അത്തരത്തിലേക്ക് കൂടുതൽ ഇൻവോൾവ് ചെയ്യാനും ഇത്തരം പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾ എനിക്ക് വളരെ സുതാര്യമായി തോന്നിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഇത്തരം പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾ ശരിക്കും നാടകത്തിനെ ഇങ്ങനെ മാനസിക ആരോഗ്യ കേന്ദ്രവുമായിട്ട് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മാനസിക ആരോഗ്യവുമായിട്ട് ബന്ധപ്പെടുത്തുന്നുള്ള ശരിക്കും കേരളത്തിലെ ആദ്യത്തെ ഒന്നുമല്ല ഇത്. കേരളത്തിൽ ഇതിനു മുമ്പ് ആരോഗ്യരംഗത്ത് ഏറ്റവും ശക്തമായ നാടക പ്രവർത്തനം നടന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആ നാടക പ്രവർത്തനത്തിന്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ടാണ് അശ്വമേധം എന്നൊരു നാടകം കേരളത്തിലുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. കുഷ്ഠം എന്നുള്ള ഒരു രോഗത്തിനെതിരായിട്ട് ആരോഗ്യ കേന്ദ്രങ്ങളെ സജ്ജീകരിച്ചത് ആ നാടകമായിരുന്നു. കേരളത്തിലുടനീളം കളിക്കപ്പെട്ട നാടകമാണ് അശ്വമേധം. കുഷ്ഠരോഗികളെ നാട് കടത്തിയിരുന്ന വലിയ ജനസമൂഹം. അതുമാതിരി തന്നെ വലിയ ആ ജനസമൂഹത്തെ അടുപ്പിച്ചു നിർത്താനും ഇത് രോഗമാണെന്നും രോഗം ഒരു കുറ്റമല്ലെന്നും മാറ്റിയെടുക്കാൻ പറ്റുന്നതാണെന്നുള്ളൊരു ബോധം, അത് വല്ലാത്തൊരു അനുഭവം ഉണ്ടാക്കിയ ഒരു നാടകമാണ്. കേരളത്തിലുടനീളം 400ഓളം സ്റ്റേജുകളിൽ കളിക്കപ്പെട്ടിരുന്ന സ്റ്റേജ് പ്ലേ എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിലാണ്. അതേപോലെ KT മുഹമ്മദിന്റെ നാടകങ്ങൾ TVക്കെതിരായിട്ട് അതൊക്കെ ഇവിടെ കേരളത്തിൽ വന്നതാണ്. കേരളത്തിലെ ആരോഗ്യ രംഗത്ത് വന്നിട്ടുള്ളതാണ്. ഇപ്പൊ മാനസിക ആരോഗ്യ രംഗത്ത് ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്ന ഇത്തരം സമീപനങ്ങൾ ശരിക്കും ചടുലമായിട്ടുള്ള പ്രവർത്തനമാണ്. സുഗതകുമാരി ടീച്ചർ നമ്മോട് ചോദിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്, ഈ വെട്ടിമാറ്റാം ശരീര അവയവങ്ങളെ, കേടുവന്ന ഓരോ അവയവങ്ങളെ, പക്ഷേ താളം തെറ്റിയ മനസ്സിനെയോ, അതാണ് ഇപ്പോൾ ചോദിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. താളം തെറ്റിയ മനസ്സിനെ എങ്ങനെ ഏകീകരിക്കും? ചന്ദ്രഹാസൻ ഇപ്പൊ ചെയ്ത പ്ലേ ഒക്കെ അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു വലിയൊരു കൂട്ടായ്മയുടെ ഭാഗമാണ്. നേരിട്ട് മനുഷ്യർ തമ്മിൽ താളം തെറ്റിയ മനുഷ്യനും അല്ലാത്തവരും തമ്മിൽ നേരിട്ട് സംവേദിച്ചു കൊണ്ട് അവൻ അവൻ്റെതായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു തീരുമാനം എടുക്കുകയാണ്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അവൻ അവൻ്റെതായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഇടം കണ്ടെത്തുകയാണ്. ഈ ഇടം കണ്ടെത്തുക എന്നുള്ളത് തന്നെയാണ് നാടകം കൊണ്ട് മെച്ചപ്പെടുന്നത്. നാടകത്തിന് കൊച്ചു കുട്ടികൾക്ക് ഇപ്പൊ 7ാം ക്ലാസ് വരെ 5ാം ക്ലാസ് വരെയുള്ള കുട്ടികൾക്ക് പാഠഭാഗങ്ങളും പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കുന്ന നാടകത്തിലൂടെയല്ലേ? നാടകം കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നില്ലേ? ഇത് തന്നെയാണല്ലോ ജീവിതത്തിനുടനീളം വരുന്നൊരു സ്വഭാവം. നാടകം എവിടെയും ഉപയോഗപ്പെടുത്താം എന്നുള്ള, അത് ആരോഗ്യരംഗത്തായിരുന്നാലും വിദ്യാഭ്യാസ രംഗത്തായിരുന്നാലും ഇപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ സംസാരിക്കുന്ന മാനസിക ആരോഗ്യ രംഗത്തായിരുന്നാലും മാനസികമായി താളം തെറ്റിയ മനുഷ്യ വിഭാഗങ്ങളെ കൂടുതൽ നമ്മോട്ട് അടുപ്പിക്കാനും കൂടുതൽ നമ്മളിലേക്ക് കേന്ദ്രീകരിക്കാനും ഇത്തരം സംരംഭങ്ങൾ തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും എനിക്കും എക്സ്പീരിയൻസ് ഉള്ളതാണ്. കഴിഞ്ഞ 10 വർഷമായിട്ട് ഡോക്ടർ PN സുരേഷിന്റെയും ഇതുപോലെയുള്ള കുറെ സംഘത്തിന്റെയും കോഴിക്കോട്ടുള്ള പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളിൽ ഞാനും എൻ്റെ സംഘവും ദശോഷ്ണിയും ശ്രദ്ധയും പങ്കാളിത്തം വഹിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. അതിൽ നിന്ന് വലിയൊരു എക്സ്പീരിയൻസ് ആണ്. ജനങ്ങൾക്ക് നല്ല രീതിയിലുള്ള വിദ്യാഭ്യാസം ഇതിനകത്ത് കിട്ടുന്നുണ്ട്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ബോധവൽക്കരണം നടത്തുന്നുണ്ട്. നന്ദി, നമസ്കാരം ഈ പങ്കെടുക്കാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞത്.
So I thought that I may have to translate what Ratnagaran said, but Sanjana has already translated and typed it in the chat box so that everybody can read. So we need not spend time for that. So very briefly saying that he has 10 years experience of doing street theatre in the district of Wayanad, where there was a lot of depression among farmers and suicides were so common, and the street plays helped him help people to communicate back to him, and just addressing the other examples in Kerala which helped the awareness of health working, like leprosy and all those things, and theatre can directly communicate. So since the first round of everybody has talked, I will just put what we were doing in this project very briefly. See, for me, joining in this MeHeLP project and working on an interactive performance was something special. The idea of the project is to extract stories, experiences the situation about the mental health literacy as it exists among mentally challenged people and also in real public, the outside public. So it was a two-phase program. The first phase we have completed. It was a closed, intimate program which we have performed. It involved very less number of people, like say 50 maximum, which includes the mentally challenged people, their caretakers, the health workers, and very close friends and the people of the project. It was not a public show to entertain anybody. So when we are trying to do this project, our aim was to make them open up, make the people open up and speak the truth. We know that these mental health issues are a big taboo in the society. People do not want to speak the truth. People do not want to share it. People want to hide about it. People don't want to, even if they say they'll be hiding certain aspects, hiding certain things, even if they were narrating, unless they feel that freedom of expression, that immediacy and confidence, they may not open up, venture up. So we are trying to extract the stories by words, action, movements, expression, verbal and non-verbal communication of the situation. So that was the purpose of the production. And it is very easy to say this, but how to approach this project was the real question, which we have discussed a lot for many, many days in separate meeting, arguments, this and that. And finally, myself and Andy could come to a kind of structure which we have to adapt. One thing is that what we decided in the beginning itself. We have a lot of stories and films and novels which has been written and produced and performed and shown. People have widely accepted it, like Manichitra Thali, etc. But these works of art were not speaking objective truth. It was trying to kind of sensationalize, make melodramas out of it, or make people laugh on the situation, or make people express a sympathy to these characters. So it's a kind of a shift from the real situation than addressing the people in a very open and the same wavelength, which is more free for them to watch. It's not for the other people to watch and okay, oh, it's very sad. It's kind of so we don't want that. So entertainment, of course, people have to be engaged and entertained. Otherwise, they won't sit through the performance. So it should not be making use out of the melodrama or the sensation or making a comedy out of it. Such kind of trivializing the situation we wanted to avoid. That's one thing. And we don't want to have a specific characters and specific incidents, even if we want to speak the reality of the real stories. So we are addressing the reality. We are trying to get into the core of the situation and find the inner reality of the story. So we have a lot of stories from which we could extract and create a new story, which is reflecting the many stories. So I may feel that I have this experience. Somebody else from a different person sees that this is my story, and the third person says partly it's my story. So it's stories knitted together, connected together to have a very core idea. And he has very effectively had a structure of the performance. And one thing which I'm very confident about it, I'm very sure about is that it is a context and cultural specificity that is more important than say a written or an academic approach. We can have a lot of papers, we can have a lot of published works, but these will not speak about the real metal. It won't have the real metal when you really go to the real people and want it to really perform. That is why the 8 spaces we have selected, we found that they can be classified into 5 different segments. Calicut and Cochin are almost same because of the urban thing, and Ponnani and Vailattur may be the same because of the culture of the people there. But Attapadi is a totally different story. Paioli is a totally different story. So the specificity of the people, the cultural specificity of the people is to be taken care of. And when you change from Calicut to Paioli, the belief system changes. The living standard changes, their priority changes, their sensibility changes, their awareness changes, their attitude changes. So we have to address these things. So by keeping that inner structure throughout, we developed different stories, different characters interacting and different situations. For example, in Attapadi, it was drug abuse and hallucinations, all those things, psychosis, all these things that mattered there. But in Calicut or Ernakulam, it is an urban lady who finds problem to deal with her mental balance and which she finds in a working space. So the cultural specificity and the context of performance, the audience, that was taken care of. That's one thing which is a lesson to me. So so when we are doing it, again, it is the space of performance. How many audience and who are the audience? In the next project, when we are going to address to a larger audience, which includes more of the public, then the format should be different. It should be more educative. It's not kind of a very inclusive performance like this. So it's the number of audience and the nature of the audience that counts to create the piece. That's one thing. And about it's the communication. Communication, it's a two-way communication. It's not that we perform and you watch. No. We start performing, but we have to take them into the performance and make them participants. So we are inviting them not verbally. We are inviting them through the tools of theater. Unknowingly, they become part of it. Unknowingly, they become part of it and they get engulfed in it. And they started performing. They started narrating stories. They started sharing their experiences. And the performance which we did, actually, our planned performance was only to 20 to 25 minutes. But the whole performance took 1 hour or more. At times 1.5 hours. So the rest of that 1 hour happened there itself. It happened, the story narration and this enactment and the music and all those things happened at the venue. It's not planned. But we have trained our actors, and Parvati is an actor, she can also, and Sanjana is also was there throughout watching the process and the whole thing. They can also come in and speak. So the actors were trained, and we have selected trained actors also, our experienced actors, trained to adjust and accommodate and improvise with the developing situation. What's happening there? How do the audience respond and react? So that the spontaneity should go along. So that a kind of performance which demands an immediacy of communication, which we achieved by sharing. Sharing in a very larger context. We shared the performance space. There was no different space for the actor and the audience. They are sitting very closely as possible. Sometimes it may be a hall, a small hall. Sometimes it may be a courtyard of a house where we share the space. The actors and the audience, very informally, they sat in a round or half round, or depending on the nature of the space, we arranged the space. So we shared the space. And naturally, we shared the stories. And the stories were shared. It was collected by so when we are performing in Calicut, there's a lot of Calicut stories, Calicut specific stories that has gone inside this one plot. And the images which we created were also shared images. For example, in Vailatur, the snake image comes a lot because many people told about snakes in the real narratives. So the images, the experiences, the stories were shared. And then we shared food in between. That's one of the easiest way to share. We give food and we eat together, and we share food and they eat food. So food sharing, space sharing, and we shared music and movement. And we started singing songs which are very popular, folk songs, asked people to clap, asked people to dance along with us, asked people to join singing, and invited people to sing their own thing. And so it's a very informal, direct sharing. And through the sharing of space, movement, music, food, space, people started sharing their stories, their inner emotions, their inner state of situations, so that no, there was no difference between the performer and the audience. There is no taboo, there is no separation, there is no boundary, and it becomes a kind of, I remember that, I have been told by people that, you have to be very careful about performing in Vailatur, because it's a highly orthodox Muslim people, and those Muslim women are very orthodox. They won't come up, they won't speak to you, you cannot talk to them, you have to be very careful, don't address them, etc. But we see that after a while, they came forward, they started talking, they started dancing with us, they started performing, shocking the organizers. So theater has that ability to cut across. And in between the performance, I remember that, it's in Payoli. One mentally challenged boy came to Parvati, who was acting as a mentally challenged person, and said, no, everything will be okay. Nothing will happen to you. You have to meet the doctor. And he's trying to console the actor, taking the actor as a real person. He himself is going through that situation. So how people could share, come, and interact. So that was a very challenging, and at a party, the whole result was so great. So people started taking medicines. That was told to me after 2, 3, 4 days. This local health workers called me that, no, those patients who are not ready to take medicines and even to take bath started taking it, and they wanted to see the next production. So it's with such kind of an approach, an honest approach, without making their stories too sentimentalized, to trivialize, and in no way we didn't want to give answers to them. So this is the answer. You do this, and you have to take medicine. You have to do this. We didn't give any answers. The answers have to be coming from them. They have to think what is the situation. They have to think what happened to them. They have to think what they have to do. So we were trying to elicit answers, to initiate a thought process inside them, and that is how the whole thing has been planned. And it was a great experience for a theater person like me and my actors to go onto it. So we have already crossed that 5:45, 5:46 minutes. And now when you start talking, I know that Andy was controlling himself to his 5 minutes, because he has a lot to speak. And Ratnagaran also was a lot to speak about his experience of watching the play, everybody. So I just conclude right now. This is in a nutshell. That's why I decided to speak last, so that I should not over speak in the beginning. So maybe we can go for the question and answer session if there's questions, or it's left to you. If anybody wants to say 1 more minute, you can add. I think that will be better if anybody wants to speak 1 more minute, 1 minute each. Yeah, Auntie, come on.
Yeah. I just want to say really that I think with any kind of theatre that is engaged with the medical and health settings, there is that form of theatre whereby you are going in to give a message, to convey information, to say to people, it's like health promotion, health advice, which is incredibly valuable. And obviously theatre has an incredibly important role to play in that. And then there is the type of theatre that this project was doing at this point, which was about stimulating a debate. But as you said, it's not about giving over answers to things. It's to show, it's to present something that may not have been presented before, and to provide a space and to draw the audience into
I think there was a connection error or something.
I think we can question.
ചന്ദ്രദാസനോട് ഇപ്പം നമ്മൾ നടത്തിയ എക്സ്പീരിയൻസ് ഉണ്ടല്ലോ ചന്ദ്രദാസിന്റെ, ശരിക്കും അതൊരു നല്ല കാരണം പ്ലേ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഡയറക്റ്റ് ആണ്, മനുഷ്യൻ തമ്മിലുള്ള കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേഷനാണ്. സ്വാഭാവികമായിട്ടും മെന്റൽ പ്രശ്നങ്ങളാവുന്ന നേരം അതിനൊരു വൈകാരിക തീവ്രത സ്വാഭാവികം ഉണ്ടാവും. ഇപ്പം മെയിൻ ആക്ട്രസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള പാർവതിയായിട്ട് ഒരാൾ കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്തു, ഇന്ററാക്ട് ചെയ്തു എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുന്നത്. ഇത്തരത്തില് ഇത് ശരിക്ക് മാനസികമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു പ്രശ്നം വല്ലാതെ ഉത്ഭവിക്കില്ല അവിടെ. ശരിക്കും അങ്ങനെ വരുന്ന ഡയറക്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് ഇങ്ങനെ കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് അങ്ങനെ അനുഭവം ഉണ്ടായിട്ടുണ്ടോ ചന്ദ്രദാസിന്? അതായത് ഒരു പ്രകോപനത്തിലേക്ക് പോകുന്നു എന്നുള്ള തോന്നിച്ചുണ്ടായിട്ടുണ്ടോ എന്നുള്ളത്?
Shall I answer the second question, as I think Chandra has frozen, I may be wrong, which was the experience working in the different cultural settings and how do we find the process of communicating with the actors. I mean, what Chandra was saying was it was very important for us once we'd created a structure that allowed us to be flexible enough to both tell specific stories from those different cultural arenas. So different areas of Kerala had specific challenges that may face those communities, but also different cultural languages. So that it was as much about the method of telling the story, the songs that were being used, the dance forms that were being used, as about the specific stories. And that was incredibly important, because again, it's about this sense that the stories we are sharing with you are your stories. They belong to you. They have come from you. So that was very, very important. And the whole design of this first part of the project was to create something that had allowed it to be flexible.
Raghu sir, you can also maybe respond to that.
Yeah, I think it was, for me, it was a very moving experience. To cite one, in Attapadi, I think Chandra knows this. In Attapadi, we saw people really mingling with the actors and trying to express their stories, etc. And they were actually very forthcoming. And we also have reports of how people were actually able to try and take on board what the theatre actually said, or what kind of proposed, in terms they were actually the following days and weeks. People were actually going and seeking help from medical professionals, and they were actually talking more about their mental illness and other things. So which was actually immediate effect of what the theatre has actually been providing for them. That it actually acted as an intervention in many respects. We didn't actually aim this to be an intervention. We were asking people to actually express their stories and have a dialogue. But here we have had an intervention mode as well.
Thank you, sir. I think we'll move on to a few other questions as well. We have few of the attendees who have given us few questions. Let's start with a question which has been asked specifically to Ratnakaran sir. Sir, how do we use theatre during this pandemic times? ഈ ഒരു കൊറോണ കാലം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് എല്ലാവർക്കും മെന്റലി എഫക്ട് ചെയ്തൊരു കാലമാണ്. ഒരു സഡൻ ലോക്ക്ഡൌണും കാര്യങ്ങളും ഒക്കെ എല്ലാവരെയും എഫക്ട് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. നമുക്ക് ഈ ഒരു സമയത്ത് ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ് എന്നുള്ള ലെവലില്, ജസ്റ്റ് തിയേറ്റർ മാത്രമല്ല, ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ് എന്നുള്ള ലെവലില് ഈ ഒരു പാൻഡമിക് ടൈംസിൽ നമുക്ക് എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഇത് ഉപയോഗിക്കാൻ പറ്റുക?
തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും നല്ല രീതിയിൽ തന്നെ ഉപയോഗിക്കാൻ പറ്റണം. കാരണം തിയേറ്റർ എപ്പോഴും നാടകക്കാരൻ, ഞാൻ ആ പേര് തന്നെ ഉപയോഗപ്പെടുത്തുന്നു. നാടകക്കാരൻ എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിൽ കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന മനുഷ്യനും തമ്മിലുള്ള ബന്ധത്തെക്കുറിച്ചാണ്. ആ ബന്ധത്തിൽ തന്നെയാണ് തുടക്കവും. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ ഇങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു സിറ്റുവേഷനിൽ സ്വാഭാവികമായിട്ടും ഒരുപാട് ഇപ്പം മരണവുമായിട്ട് മല്ലിടുന്ന ഒരുപാട് പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. ജീവിക്കാൻ പറ്റാത്ത ഒരുപാട് പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ ഞങ്ങൾ നാടകപ്രവർത്തകരുടെ ഇടയിൽ തന്നെയുണ്ട്. അതല്ല, ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ് എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിൽ പലരെയും ഇന്നലെ തന്നെ ഒരു മരണമുണ്ടായി. ഒരാള് മരണപ്പെട്ടു, ഒരു ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റാണ് മരണപ്പെട്ടത്. അപ്പൊ ഇത് ജീവിക്കാൻ പ്രയാസമായിരുന്ന ഒരു ഘട്ടത്തിലേക്ക് ഈ രോഗം അതിക്രമിക്കുന്ന നേരം സ്വാഭാവികമായിട്ടും നാടകപ്രവർത്തകർ ഇടപെടുന്നുണ്ട്. അത് സാമ്പത്തികമായിട്ട് മാത്രമല്ല, സാമ്പത്തികമായിട്ടുള്ളൊരു സൗകര്യങ്ങൾ എങ്ങനെയാണെന്നുള്ളതല്ല, പക്ഷെ മാനസികമായിട്ട് നമ്മൾ അവരെ കൂട്ടി യോജിപ്പിക്കാൻ, ചേർത്ത് പിടിക്കാൻ ഈ തിയേറ്ററിന് തിയേറ്റർ പേഴ്സൺ എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിൽ നമുക്ക് കഴിയുന്നുണ്ട് എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. മറ്റു പലർക്കും കഴിയാത്തത് തിയേറ്റർ പേഴ്സണിനാണ് കൃത്യമായിട്ട് കമ്മ്യൂണിക്കേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുക, അവരെ ബന്ധപ്പെടാൻ പറ്റുക എന്നുള്ളതാണ് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നത്. എനിക്കൊരു വേറെ എക്സ്പീരിയൻസ് വേറെ ഒന്നുള്ളത്, ഞാൻ ടൗൺ ഹാളിൽ ഒരു നാടകം കളിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ഇതേമാതിരി ഒരു 4 കൊല്ലം മുമ്പോ 3 കൊല്ലം മുമ്പോ ആണ് ടൗൺ ഹാളിൽ. ആ സമയത്ത് ഒരാൾ ടൗൺ ഹാളിന്റെ തൊട്ട് പിറകിലാണ് ട്രെയിൻ പോകുന്ന സ്ഥലമുള്ളത്. മരണത്തുമായിട്ട് ബന്ധപ്പെട്ടുകൊണ്ട് അദ്ദേഹം അങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു ആലോചനയായിട്ട് ഞങ്ങളെ നാടകം കണ്ടു. നാടകത്തിന്റെ അവസാനം അദ്ദേഹം തന്നെ വന്നു കാണി ഞങ്ങളുടെ സ്റ്റേജിൽ വന്ന് പറയാണ്, ഞാൻ ആത്മഹത്യയുമായി ബന്ധപ്പെട്ടുകൊണ്ടാണ് എൻ്റെ ജീവിതം ഇപ്പൊ ഇവിടെ വെച്ച് നിൽക്കുന്നത്. പക്ഷെ നിങ്ങളുടെ ഈ എക്സ്പീരിയൻസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള നാടകത്തിന്റെ പ്രവർത്തനം എന്നെ തിരിച്ച് പ്രേരിപ്പിക്കുന്നു, ഇതിനെപ്പറ്റി സംസാരിക്കാൻ ഇഷ്ടപ്പെടുന്നു എന്നുള്ളൊരു എക്സ്പീരിയൻസ് വലിയ ഒരു കോൺട്രിബ്യൂഷനാണ് ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് അന്ന് കിട്ടിയത്. വല്ലാത്തൊരു അനുഭവമായിരുന്നു ശരിക്കും അദ്ദേഹം സ്റ്റേജിൽ കയറി വന്ന് പറഞ്ഞത്. അപ്പോ
താങ്ക് യു സർ. നമുക്ക് ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റനും കൂടെ ഉണ്ട് സർ. അത് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു രഘു സർ can answer that question, which has been asked. Why do you choose participatory theatre for mental health literacy project? Why was the participatory theatre theme chosen for a mental health project?
Right. Its answer is very simple. We want to talk to people. We want to engage with people. We want people, because we can do a research whereby, we are not talking to anybody. We are talking about everybody's life. We are talking about each and everyone's life, their experiences, based on Mike and Andy and everybody else in the panel actually said. We are also talking about their feelings and how they're actually dealing with it. So through theater, they're actually able to relive those experiences. We can retell those stories to those individuals. So participatory theater is one of the, I think, there are ways, but for us, we feel that it's one of the effective ways whereby immediate participation of the community, of those individuals, whereby they can really attach to the story being told. So it is connecting very much with them. And it is actually indirectly able to make some behavioral and cognitive changes for those communities.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. The next question is, do you think movies can also have a same impact? Or do you think whether it can be used as a research method? I think because it's movies, we can maybe have Gautami answer that question.
Yeah, so I think if my memory serves me right, with regards to movies having the same impact, there was a movie called Tare Zameen Par, and I think it's after that movie came out that a lot of regular people or common people in India understood that, I think the movie was talking more about autism and, children who are not, on this, they don't have the same IQ level, or, there are differently able children. So I think it's after that movie came out that a lot of parents and, a lot of people in the general community started becoming more aware of the fact that, this is how it is. You can't discriminate them. You can't put them in a school, where you have regular children and they need to be taken care of specifically, and, they have special needs. And I think we became a lot more understanding, as in, at least I'm assuming that, in general, the Indian population became a lot more understanding towards these kind of children after the impact of, after this movie came out. So yes, I do believe that if when you take it in that sort of way, it does have an impact. But as a research method, I don't know. See, the thing with movies is it's normally very subjective, and it depends on who's writing the movie, how much experience they have, what research they put into studying about the illness and all that. There's another question also that was asked to me with regard to being the term psycho that is being so commonly used in arts and in films. So the reason I'm trying to combine both these questions is because, see, when you use terms like psycho to make a character appear more interesting and more I don't know, personality wise more of eccentric or whatever, the problem is that people who do not have an experience, or people who do not have an exposure to mental illnesses and, the different types of, or the varieties of illnesses that could be there, they associate that the only possible, at least really ignorant people might assume that, okay, a psycho or a person who is like, people assume that a mentally ill person is mad, but that's not true. You have so many varieties and you have so many variations of mental illnesses. People don't I mean, I think it's even depression and even being sad is not considered normal. So I think the problem is using the term psycho or using such like words, like especially in today's youth. I've seen so many like people in the early 20s calling each other, oh, he's a psycho, even psycho, psycho. They just use it so commonly or so loosely without taking into consideration the impact that these terms could have. So I feel the only issue is with using these words is that people forget that there are different kinds of mental illnesses. There are different varieties, there are different forms that manifest and that show in different way. And when you normalize everything into one particular term, the whole idea behind trying to make people understand it completely goes away. So that is the problem. And such people who do not actually think, or people who do not put a lot of thought into their content and what they're trying to tell the audience, and they do a lot of, if they don't do their homework and they don't do their research, a lot of misinformation eventually gets given out, and then that leads to more misunderstanding. So that's what I feel. And again, with research, I mean, what you could what comes right now on top of my head is to see these popular movies that talk about psychological illnesses or mental health disorders, and see and show it to people and ask them like what did you understand? Do you think you might change the way you live your life? Or do you think that like showing them these movies or asking them, have you seen this movie, did it impact your life and how you approached people with this particular disorder before and after? So I think those are the possible line in which you could use commercial movies. But other than that, I'm not sure how much commercial movies would be viable to such sort of a research.
Thank you so much, Gautami. The next question is again, it says, don't artists disguise their trauma using art? Is there a difference between disguised art and memoir where we bear all? Do both have the same therapeutic effect for the artist and the audience? I think Mike, being a theater expert and a mental health expert, you can maybe address that question.
Thank you. I'll try. I'm certainly not a mental health expert. In fact, I'm not sure what I'm an expert in, but I'll try and answer the question. And forgive me if I've misunderstood it. I think I understand what's being asked here. And I think we're probably talking about two very different things. So when somebody is perhaps writing or telling a memoir or performing a memoir, there's an element of the confessional about that, and that is one thing. That's a very important form of dealing with one's own trauma. On the other hand, I'm not sure that artists necessarily disguise their trauma using art, but I think in the sense of hiding it, but I think they bring their trauma to the art, because I think most artists, certainly those artists in whatever medium they work, the ones that I know, bring themselves to their work. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're wearing their trauma on their sleeve for it to be easily seen all the time. But as an artist, you can only bring yourself to your work. And if yourself has a history of trauma, then that has to inform the way that you as an artist respond to a particular set of questions or a particular stimulus. So it always has to be there, because the most important thing that an artist brings to any situation is themselves and their honesty. Because being an artist is actually a very vulnerable thing to do. You put yourself in a vulnerable position and an exposing position as a performer, because all you've got is yourself to communicate with people, and that's not just your physical self, but it is your cultural self, your memory self. It is your own stories, your own experiences that you bring to that. I don't know if that's answered the question. I hope it's in some small way. I hope it's answered it. But that's probably the best I can do at the moment.
Thank you so much, Mike. The next question says, do you think there is a need to raise awareness of mental health among school and university students in Kerala? If so, what is the best way to go about it? Again, this whole session is being live on Facebook as well. So we have few questions coming from Facebook. This is one of those questions. Raghu sir, can you address the question?
Well, I'll try. It is important that both young people, especially during this pandemic period, young people are actually experiencing a lot of issues because of the lockdown and restrictions and other things. So it is important, I think, within the school context in Kerala and also within the university college context in Kerala, there is good discussion, good talk on mental health. And I think I keep talking about this. We need to use the problem about in the field of mental health is we use mental health as a term just to actually also talk about mental health and also mental illness. But mental health is not mental illness. Mental illness is something very different from mental. I think it's important that young people understand that, especially in this time, because there are ways in which you construct mental health. And I think, and people are then they can actually learn about when they actually shift into the mode of mental distress and mental illness, they're actually able to seek help and they're able to actually understand those things. It is very crucial for people to actually understand that. And I think young people, school, I think, most of the children are actually in remote education mode. They're not actually able to play with their friends, etc. I think it's important that they talk to each other about those things. And also some of those things actually becomes a subject area within the curriculum itself. And again, the performing theater, in whatever shape or form within schools or colleges could play a major role in promoting that mental health awareness.
Thank you, Raghu sir. We will have one last question and I think we can wind up the session. We've already reached time. The last question says, how was the experience performing in urban and rural spaces? Was there a big difference in how the audience reacted? I think Chandradasan sir can answer that question because he knows how the team sort of performed in all these regions and we generally had different reactions from the audience. Chandra sir?
I think it's better for you to answer the question because you have experienced it more directly. I think if in the urban spaces, people are more aware about the situation. They knew it much more than the rural people, and they are more hiding also. Honestly, we couldn't identify a person whether he's just an audience, a normal person, or a person with a mental health issue. So especially in Edapalli, etc., we couldn't identify people. We don't want to identify also. We actually have the seats mixed so that we need not know who is who and who is what. So we couldn't identify. But in rural spaces, the people were much more open. It was much easy for us to just get into the inner heart of the people so that they come out with their real stories, with the real... I felt that they need it more than the urban people. In the rural spaces, they needed much more. They wanted it. They demanded it. But of course, there is a level of threshold which we have to cross and get connected with these people in the rural space. They are more honest. It was easy to communicate with them. That was the experience, and you could very well tell us how you found different kinds of people, because you were among the people. We are just standing back and watching after designing and deciding it.
Yeah, sure. I think there was a very obvious difference while performing in urban and rural areas. One of the major thing being the audience react, like Chandradasan sir had mentioned earlier. We could actually recognize people with mental health conditions easily in the rural areas. They would, and it was like they would actually think, they wouldn't really understand the difference between a performance and they would and the reality. They would actually think that we are also having the similar mental condition as theirs. there was also instances where these users would come while we are performing. They would come to the stage and they would sort of tell us things about their mental condition, and they would say, it's okay, I am also going through the same thing and it's fine, and things like that. So I think this whole incorporation of theater to explore mental health literacy worked a lot better in the rural areas than in the urban areas, because I think it just got them into very ease, and then they could tell us what exactly was going on with them. And post our performance sessions, the audience interaction and the community engagement also sort of went very well in the rural community areas. So yeah, that's something. Andy, you want to add something to this? While conceiving this process of theater, you knew it before that this has to be done in front of a rural and an urban audience. How did you conceive the format for this, like considering we had varied audiences?
Well, I mean, it was something that we knew that we would have, because we were going to so many different spaces, it would have been incredibly time consuming to make 8 different plays. So we had to create a skeleton. And what's interesting is that whatever story you're telling, in whatever culture, there are some basic narrative arcs, some stories, you know, something happens, somebody has to face a challenge, they overcome that challenge in some way. You know, from wherever you are, story, as well as the specifics, there are also these essential story arcs that everyone recognizes. So it was about creating something that had that solid structure that, as Chandra mentioned at the beginning, that we could then tease out the culturally specific stories, and then also find the different ways in which we could bring culturally specific material, performance material, to tell those stories. So sadly I never got to see any of the shows in the rural areas, which I would have loved to have done.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andy. I think we are already past our time limit. Just to wind the session up, Raghu sir, can you just wind up the session and maybe give us a brief of the entire panel discussion?
Thank you very much. It's been an exciting, as I say, a vibrant discussion, and I think we could carry on discussing this for many more hours to come. It's been interesting discussion with the panel, and everybody contributed from how this actually shows how the artists and clinicians and service providers can actually come together and work together for a common aim. The Nagarans are mentioned about how the olden days, how people actually have interacted through street play, etc. I think it does really move people together. It does actually bring people together, both in the rural community and in the urban community. So for us, I think this is actually an experiment that's been tried and tested in many ways around the world, but it is to actually mobilize communities. And I think it's different perspectives from artists and also mental health experts, and how we can actually create that dialogue and engagement. What is important in the field of mental health and mental illness is to have that dialogue, talking about mental health. And I think talking about mental health can actually help us to actually prevent this suffering in silence. And I think it's important that we talk about mental health openly to our trusted colleagues, family, and friends. And I think theater is the best medium that I know of creating that space and time and agency for people to go forward in their lives.